I was trying to adjust to a life that had quickly and unexpectedly ended after more than 20 years of marriage on a quiet and cold Saturday night, only a few weeks after the divorce papers were completed. The stillness in my formerly lively house seemed strange in comparison to the weekends which were packed with laughter and family rituals. One such tradition was our weekly trips to the bathhouse, a simple but valued place where my husband's kid Logan and I could unwind and reconnect in the warmth and steam. Logan requested that we do the ceremony alone after the divorce. I initially resisted. It was strange, even painful, to continue a tradition so inextricably linked to our now broken family unit. However, Logan's perseverance eventually won me over. "Come on, Mom." He pressed his voice lightly yet forcefully. "We don't have to let everything change." That evening, I succumbed and packed up our possessions before leaving. The bathhouse was quiet, as it usually is in the winter, and the air within was thick with the soothing scent of cedarwood and steam. As I stepped inside, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time, both bodily and emotional, like a cozy cocoon against the harsh cold of the outside world. Logan, 22, had grown tremendously over the years. He was no longer the little youngster who used to play in the small pool, causing waves of excitement. Instead, he was a composed young man, tall, with wide shoulders, and a calm confidence that indicated his maturity. Nonetheless, his lovely, familiar eyes projected a warmth that made me think of his father. We took a seat in a private family steam room, which was comfortable without being stifling. We had a relaxing time reclining side by side on the wooden bench, draped in towels and soaked in soothing steam. Logan broke the silence with a discreet, "You seem better." His tone was hesitant and even frightened. I gave him a shocked expression, better since everything. His gaze met mine momentarily before looking away. "It's been a challenging few months," he said. I took a deep breath and felt the steam relax my shoulders. "I'm not sure about better," I responded honestly, maybe just adjusting. He nodded and his expression softened. "That is something," he added. For a while we sat in thoughtful quiet. The steady hiss of steam filled the room, calming my thoughts. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. Logan rested against the wooden wall, and I couldn't help but notice how much he had grown. Not only physically, but emotionally. He had been my anchor throughout the divorce, offering unwavering support without being asked. The minutes passed, and I realized how much I value these times with him. The volatile, sometimes brutal world outside seemed remote, and within this warm refuge, it was just the two of us, bound by something more than blood. I asked if you remembered how you would beg to spend hours in the sauna. Logan broke the silence with a little grin, his laughter, deep and genuine, warming the room more than any steam could. Yeah, my dad would generally drag me out after 10 minutes, certain I had overheated. I giggled, either joking or because he couldn't stand the heat himself. For the first time in months, talking about my ex-husband did not pain. We spent the next hour moving between the steam room, the pool, and the lounge, reminiscing about simpler times. I was struck by how simple it appeared to communicate with Logan, and how our connection had evolved over time. He was not my only son. He was also a confidant and comrade as we navigated this odd and unfamiliar chapter of our lives. As the evening drew to a close, we sat quietly in a corner of the lounge enjoying tea. Logan reached out and placed his hands tenderly on mine. "You'll be fine," he said calmly, his voice serene. I fought back tears, astounded by the strength of his statements. "Do you think so?" I asked. I know he stated with certainty that we would both do it. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I believed him. Despite the tumult of the following weeks, our Saturday evenings at the bathhouse became a soothing routine. Each visit seemed like a holy ritual, a quiet respite from the outside world, where everything was raw and unexpected. Our silences were never awkward, but always filled with unspoken understanding. It was on one of these nights, maybe the third or fourth after the divorce, that I discovered how much I enjoyed spending time with Logan. He not only provided leisure, but also a feeling of community. His presence stabilized me, providing a steady anchor in a life that may often seem chaotic. That night when I arrived at the steam room, I observed him waiting for me with his towel casually thrown over his shoulder. He had a lightness about him that I hadn't noticed before, a serene assurance that made me hope for the first time in a long time that everything would be well. Logan grinned as I approached, and I quickly returned the smile. The familiar sight of him gave me a pleasant sensation unrelated to the bathhouse. "You are late." He insulted me as he stood aside to allow me enter. I rolled my eyes and brushed by him with a cheeky glance. "I stated I was the one who drove you here. If I am late, it is on you both." He smiled softly in the wooden chamber as we took our places on the benches surrounded by swirling steam that distorted the room's lines. Logan fell back and rested his head on the wall. And, for a while, I simply watched him. I had seen it before, but something about these nights made me more conscious of him. His shoulders dominated the area beside me, and his stance emanated calm might. He now emanated a calm confidence, a maturity that belied his age. "Are you all right, Mother?" he queried, and his voice interrupted my thoughts. His caring eyes filled with the same care that had guided me through so many terrible moments met mine. I quickly consented, removing damp hair off my face. "Of course I'm only thinking." "What is this about?" he asked. I responded honestly, "How much I adore spending these evenings with you," before I could consider it. "It's great to spend this time together." He smiled unguardedly and warmly, which made my chest tighten. "Yes," he responded softly. "It is." The air between us seemed heavier, not unpleasant, but charged with something unsaid, as if a truth hung there waiting to be spoken. I was unsure how to interpret it, or if Logan agreed. As we moved from the steam room to the plunge pool that night, I noted several little details. He kept his focus on me even when he thought I wasn't looking. When he handed me the towel, his hand barely brushed mine. The encounter seemed to linger a bit too long. Even if I tried to convince myself I was only imagining it, he was my kid after all. Even as I consoled myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something between us was shifting, transforming into something I didn't quite understand. By the following visit, I found myself looking forward to it in a new way. Despite my best attempts to hide it, I couldn't escape the sensation of calm excitement. Logan seemed to feel it as well. His feet seemed lighter as we entered the bathhouse, and his joy was evident as he led us to our favorite steam room. As we settled down and the familiar warmth enveloped us, I couldn't help but feel thankful. Outside the world was cold and uncertain, but here we were alone, cocooned by the steam, and nothing else seemed to matter. That night, we spoke for longer than normal, seamlessly flowing between shared experiences and future goals. Logan discussed his professional goals and desires, his voice filled with quiet passion, and his eyes lighted up as he spoke about what was important to him. I listened intently, impressed by his words and how he presented himself. "You are beautiful. Are you aware that—" I spoke suddenly, the words flooding out before I could stop them. Logan blinks, and his expression softens. "Mom, no, really." I interrupted. "I don't say this enough. Logan, you're a very great guy. Your father and I couldn't have hoped for a better son." When his gaze met mine, time seemed to stop still. "You're pretty amazing, too," he said softly. "You have been through so much, yet you are still here." The way his voice fell on the last syllable made me shudder, and it had nothing to do with the cold air outside the steam room. I opened my mouth to respond, but was unable to find any words, so I just nodded. Later, as we sat in the lounge, wrapped in luxurious blankets and drinking tea, I felt an unexpected wave of happiness come over me. Logan was staring at me, his expression unreadable. "You know," he interrupted the stillness, "I don't think I've ever felt closer to you than I do right now." I looked at him astonished by the vulnerability in his tone. "Logan," I began, but he continued, his gaze unwavering. "The previous weeks have been both tough and gratifying. Spending so much time with you seems like I'm finally seeing you for who you actually are." I was unsure how to respond. Something about his comments and the way he looked at me seemed to change everything. The formerly clear and distinct lines between us seemed to blur. For the first time, I was unsure how I felt about it. The following Saturday, the air between us seemed heavy, a mix of expectancy and something deeper that we both avoided acknowledging. Logan greeted me at the door with his customary grin, but it seemed kinder, and his gaze stayed on me for a little longer than usual. Despite my best efforts to persuade myself that it was just our newfound closeness, I couldn't deny that there was energy between us. Things felt different at the bathhouse. As we resumed our customary routine of rotating between the steam room and the plunge pool, I noted a slight change in our interactions. Logan seemed more reserved, his demeanor contemplative. He eventually broke the silence after we were settled inside the lounge with steaming cups of tea. "Hey," he remarked in a casual tone, "have you ever had a massage here?" I stared at him over the lip of my cup, surprised. "No, I haven't. Why are you asking?" He shrugged, a faint grin emerging at the corners of his lips. "I simply thought it may be a great idea." "Have you lately looked to be anxious?" I raised an eyebrow. Though his view was not erroneous, the stress of the divorce and the upheaval in our lives remained intense. This startled me. "Isn't it tense?" I remarked, chuckling faintly. "You deserve to relax," he said, his voice both amusing and honest. "Let me book one for you." I waved him off. "Logan, this isn't necessary." But he persevered. His jovial tone contrasted with his serious demeanor. "Really allow me to handle this for you." Before I could dispute, he was already at the desk chatting with the receptionist. When he returned, he grinned triumphantly. He responded, "You're all set." He paused and added with a sheepish expression. I laughed and shook my head, wondering whether I had arranged one for myself. "Of course you did." The massage was really fantastic. The therapist's skilled hands worked out every knot in my back and shoulders. At the end, I felt an unanticipated lightness, and my body was completely relaxed. Logan waited in the lounge later, his expression gleaming. "Well," he said, bowing his head and examining me. "How do you feel?" I joked that I felt like I could float out of here, which made him chuckle. "Good. That was the whole goal." Logan lay down next to me later that evening, while we napped in one of the smaller steam rooms, his movements soothing and calming. I stared at him, seeing his calm attitude and the placid satisfaction on his face. "You know, I mentioned disrupting the calm. You were right. That was just what I needed." He grinned, his eyes filled with malice. "See, I know what is best for you, Mom." I softly poked him with my elbow, and his words warmed me in an odd way. Maybe I should return the favor. I was kidding. "Give you a massage someday." He raised an eyebrow and his smile softened. "Are you making an offer?" I stopped, unsure why his question caused my chest to flutter. "Why not? Fair is fair, right?" Logan sat up, his gaze more concentrated. "You do not have to," he added softly. "I simply wanted you to relax tonight." "I know," I replied with a grin. The warmth of the environment made the event seem oddly personal, yet I want to. "You have done so much for me over the past several weeks. This is the minimum I can do." Back home, the atmosphere was more relaxed, but still charged with an odd intensity. Logan considered my offer carefully. Lying face down on the sofa, his broad back exposed, I carefully started massaging the tension out of his shoulders, uncertain of the proper pressure to use. His pleasant hum encouraged me, and I felt more confident. "Where did you learn this?" he inquired, his voice muffled by the sofa. "I didn't," I admitted while laughing. "I'm merely winging it." "Okay, your improvisation is pretty excellent." He sighed quietly, his muscles relaxing under my touch. "You're a natural." Something in his deep, almost reverent tone made me cringe. I tried to focus on the knots in his back, but the closeness of the scenario made this impossible. "Is this helpful?" I asked softly. He turned slightly to meet my gaze. "Yes," he responded softly. "It's quite useful." For a short while the room felt strangely quiet, with just the gentle hum of the heater. I had no idea what to say or how to respond to the implied weight in his eyes. "Okay," I muttered. Finally, I removed my hands. "That's enough for one night." Logan sat up slowly, stretching carefully. "Thank you, Mom," he said politely. "Really." The tension between us was evident at the bathhouse the next week, despite the fact that it went unspoken. It was there in the way his eyes lingered on me, the subtle brush of his palm on mine as he handed me a towel. I told myself I was only imagining things, but the fire that burned in my chest every time he looked at me indicated otherwise. After our usual routine of steam rooms and plunge pools, we returned to the massage lounge. Logan did not offer to schedule another appointment this time around. He chatted casually, leaning back in his chair. "I think I'd enjoy another one of your massages." Despite my best attempts to hide it, his remarks caught me off surprise. "Oh, are you serious?" "Yes," he said, his gaze steadfast. "Are you better than the professionals?" I laughed, but it seemed too loud in the still room. "Flattery will get you somewhere." "Logan, he smiled softly. That is excellent to know. Later that night, as I laid in bed, contemplating on the events of the evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in our relationship. The once clear boundaries were blurred, leaving me unsure of how to cross them. Only one thing was certain. I was looking forward to next Saturday more than I wanted to admit. The next Saturday, I found myself running late. I hurried downstairs to see Logan waiting at the front door after a business email had delayed my arrival. My breath seized when I saw him carrying flowers. Logan, I responded, looking at the bouquet in his hands. The bouquet, made up of white lilies and tiny pink roses, was beautiful, modest, and gorgeous. What's this? He shrugged his shoulders, feeling embarrassed. I believed you deserved them. Mom, you've been amazing lately. I wanted to do something nice for you. My heart was flooded with his words, and my throat clenched as I accepted the bouquet. You didn't have to do this, I explained, but my grin conveyed how much the gesture meant to me. I wanted to. He spoke simply, his eyes meeting mine with an honesty that made my chest tighten. Despite several hurdles, you stayed loyal to yourself. As my hands brushed over the velvety petals of the flowers, I fought to come up with the perfect response. Words failed me. Neither of them felt satisfied. Instead, I put the bouquet on the counter and returned my attention to him. I instinctively wrapped my arms over his shoulders, embracing him in a natural but surprising way. Thank you, I whispered against his chest, my voice so soft it could hardly be heard. This means a lot. His arms tightened over me, and his warmth surrounded me in a way that felt both calming and protective. We sat there for a long time, none of us speaking, until he leaned back slightly and tenderly kissed my cheek. The contact persisted, leaving us with an enjoyable sensation unconnected to the steam room we were about to explore. Anytime, he whispered gently, keeping his tone cool and steady. That evening, when we entered the bathhouse together, I detected a slight shift in the air between us. There was a hitherto unknown level of closeness and serene understanding. Every glance, every brief touch of his hand on mine had increased meaning. As we went about our regular tasks, everything seemed to take on a more deliberate tone. The steam room seemed quieter, the air dense with unspoken whispers. Even the water in the plunge pool seemed warmer, as if it held some of our strain. Logan reached out and softly brushed his hand to mine as we sat side by side in the lounge, drinking tea. The little motion prompted an involuntary shiver to go through me. You understand, he said, breaking the silence. Saturdays are the highlight of my week. I looked at him, astonished by the calm seriousness in his remarks. Are they? I inquired. He nodded, his gaze finding mine. Yes, I realized that we began doing this to restore some normality after everything. But suddenly, he lowered his sight and fell on his hands. Now they're simply important to me. His words lingered in the air, full with unspoken meaning. I had no clue how to respond as the warmth spread through my chest, so I just nodded and mumbled, "They are likewise important to me." Later that night, as we were preparing to leave, Logan grabbed me aside near the door. The bathhouse was almost vacant, with gloomy lighting and long shadows extending over the walls, making it seem more intimate. Hey, he said gently, brushing his palm on my arm. I've been wanting to inquire how you're doing. Really. His question caught me off guard. I'm okay, I said quickly, despite the fact that the words sounded hollow. Are you in? He riveted his stare on me. Because it's okay if you're not. I simply want you to know I'm always here for you. His earnest tone and resolute attitude astounded me. A knot formed in my throat, and all I could do was nod, frightened my voice would betray me. Come here, he said softly. His voice was so calming that it almost shattered me. Before I could react, he pulled me into another embrace. His arms closed around me with such affection that my chest hurt. One hand rested on the back of my head, his fingers stroking through my hair as he drew me closer. I closed my eyes and rested my face on his chest. He said, "You're great," barely above a whisper. I hope you realize how my heart raced, and my mind was a tangled mess of emotions I couldn't sort through. When he finally pulled back his hands, they lingered on my shoulders, and his glare was so intense that it held me in place. He leaned closer and dropped another kiss on my cheek. This one lasted a bit longer than required. The touch of his lips sent chills down my spine. "Good night, Mom," he said gently. As I watched him walk away, his tone remained steady and low. My heart raced as I tried to absorb what had just happened. The boundaries that had always been so clear between us, now confused, shifting in ways I didn't quite understand. Throughout the week, I couldn't stop thinking about his actions. Every time I passed by the flowers on the counter, their vibrant petals reminded me of his words, his arms around me, and the sensation of his kiss on my cheek. Everything appeared so simple and harmless, yet it was very necessary. When Saturday came around again, I was filled with both excitement and anxiety. I had no clue what to expect or how to manage our growing closeness. But when Logan greeted me at the door with a charming grin and kind eyes, I felt my anxieties go away. "Ready?" he queried in his tone, light yet with depth that hadn't been there before. I nodded and smiled back as I always picked up my bags.